U.S. President Donald Trump says he's raising reciprocal tariffs and auto duties on South Korea to 25% from 15%. Pointing out Seoul's National Assembly hasn't finalized the domestic process to implement the two countries' bilateral trade deal. Following Trump's tariff hike announcement, the Blue House convened an emergency meeting and announced it will convey its commitment to realizing the Seoul-Washington trade deal. Seoul's trade and industry ministers are heading to the U.S. for talks with their American counterparts. North Korea launched multiple short-range ballistic missiles toward the East Sea on Tuesday afternoon, following U.S. Undersecretary of Defense for Policy Elbridge Colby's visit to South Korea and ahead of the regime's upcoming 9th Party Congress. South Korea woke up today to a shockwave that was felt across the government, businesses, as well as the National Assembly, after U.S. President Donald Trump said South Korean imports will again face 25% tariffs. Our Kim Do-yeon starts us off.
U.S. President Donald Trump said on Tuesday morning, Korea Standard Time, that he was unilaterally reversing a tariff reduction agreement made last July, raising rates on certain South Korean goods from 15% to 25%. Writing on Truth Social, Trump explicitly blamed the National Assembly, stating South Korea's legislature is not living up to its deal. He declared that due to the legislative delay, he was increasing South Korean tariffs on autos, lumber, pharma, and all other reciprocal tariffs. Under the agreement, Seoul pledged a $350 billion investment package, but the initial $20 billion installment has stalled. With the large amount of investment agreed, the Assembly has proposed a special bill for this investment but has not made progress since the proposal, with no passage in sight for now. The Truth Social post wasn't the first warning, it turns out. Local media reported that just 2 weeks ago, U.S. Charge of Affairs James Heller sent a formal letter to Deputy Prime Minister for Science Bae Kyung-hun demanding Seoul honor the joint fact sheet signed last year. This also comes as just last week, South Korea's finance minister told Reuters not a lot of investment can be made under the current foreign exchange situation, at least for this year. Experts see this as one of the triggering factors for the timing, especially with the U.S. Supreme Court's decision on Trump's tariffs coming up.
Trump argues that if the Supreme Court rules the tariffs unconstitutional, the U.S. would be forced to issue massive refunds to trading partners like Japan and Europe. This is not just the tariffs imposed, but also the investment packages, and it's a scenario he claims would be economically damaging.
Amid rising tensions with European nations over Greenland and the U.S. continued push and pull with Canada, Trump is also likely using Korea to send a warning message to other partners.
I believe there is a significant aspect of sending a signal to other countries as well. It conveys the message we are watching and warns them to implement terms faithfully and swiftly.
There is also a political dimension. Facing headwinds ahead of the midterms, particularly regarding immigration controversies in Minnesota, President Trump may be seeking a political win. However, analysts caution that this is likely a secondary factor compared to the stalled trade deal. Kim Do-yeon, ARIRANG News.
And following the surprise announcement, the Blue House reaffirmed its commitment to implementing the country's bilateral trade deal, adding it will respond calmly. Our correspondent Yoon Jung-min has more.
U.S. President Donald Trump's unexpected social media message on Tuesday morning scrambled a response meeting at the top office in Seoul. After the meeting led by Chief of Staff for Policy Kim Yong-bum and National Security Advisor Ri Song-nak, the Blue House said in a readout that the government will relay its commitment to carry out the Korea-U.S. trade deal while responding to the renewed tariff uncertainty in a calm manner. It noted that tariff policy officially takes effect only after administrative actions are taken, such as a Federal Register notice. The office seems to be studying what's behind Trump's message, insisting on raising auto and reciprocal tariffs on South Korea to 25%, up from the 15% agreed on under the Allies trade deal. Trump wrote that Korea's legislature was not living up to the deal, but it's unclear whether he's complaining solely because of the legislative process or if there are other reasons beneath the surface. Tuesday's meeting centered on examining follow-up measures to the Special Act on Managing Strategic Investment between Korea and the U.S., which is now being reviewed at the National Assembly. For close communication with Washington, Industry Minister Kim Jong-kwon, who's now in Canada for a business trip, will fly to the U.S. as soon as possible to meet Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. Trade Minister Yo Han-gu will also travel to Washington soon to meet his U.S. counterpart, Jamieson Greer. The meeting was attended by the Trade Minister as well as senior officials from the Finance and Foreign Affairs ministries. Chief of Staff Kang Hoon-sik and the Industry Minister remotely joined the meeting from Canada. Watchers expect the top office to refrain from immediately responding to the Trump-style unpredictability, but rather closely watch the situation in a calm manner, as the office noted. Yoon Jung-min, ARIRANG News.
And Trump's proposed increase in tariffs on South Korea has put the country's auto industry on alert, with warnings of a hit to major car makers' earnings. Our Park Jun-han has the details.
U.S. President Donald Trump's plan to raise tariffs on South Korean imports from 15% back to 25% could impact Korea's major export sectors, such as automobiles. For South Korean auto giants Hyundai Motor Company and Kia Motors, the U.S. is a crucial market. In 2025, Hyundai, Kia, GM Korea, and Renault Korea exported nearly 1.65 million vehicles to North America, with Hyundai and Kia alone shipping over 1.19 million. Credit rating agencies and securities firms in Korea estimate that a 10% difference in tariffs could result in at least 3.1 to 4.4 trillion Korean won, or about 2.14 to 3 trillion US dollars in earnings losses for Hyundai Motor Group, which includes Kia Motors. In fact, the two companies already absorbed about 4.6 trillion won in losses during the second and third quarters of 2025 due to high tariffs, despite achieving record U.S. sales of over 1.83 million cars and a market share high of 11.3%. A sudden jump in tariffs would inevitably create major disruptions in sales planning and uncertainty. Moreover, if automakers pass the higher tariffs on to consumers, Korean cars could lose price competitiveness against major auto exporters such as Japan. Although the tariff news overnight shocked the local markets with them opening below Monday's close, the Kospi on Tuesday closed above 5,000 for the first time in history due to a sharp rise in semiconductor stocks, which are exempt from the tariff increases. Park Jun-han, ARIRANG News.
U.S. President Donald Trump has threatened to reimpose steep tariffs on the South Korean cars and other products. And the remarks have sent shockwaves through domestic political circles here in the country, reigniting debate over stalled legislation and divisions inside the National Assembly. Our political correspondent Moon Hae-chan joins us in the studio to tell us more. Welcome back, Hae-chan.
Good evening, Tammy.
Hae-chan, let's start with the basics. So what exactly is Trump accusing the Korean National Assembly of failing to do so, and which legislation is at the center of this whole dispute?
So at the heart of the dispute here is a special bill that's often referred to as the U.S. Investment Bill. It was introduced last November to implement a Korea-U.S. trade agreement under which Washington agreed to lower tariffs in exchange for South Korea committing $350 billion in strategic investment in the United States. Now, the bill is designed to create the legal and institutional framework for that investment, including how funds are raised, managed, and overseen, as well as the establishment of a bilateral strategic investment fund. Without this law, South Korea lacks a clear domestic legal basis to fully execute the commitments outlined in the agreement. While the government argues that it fulfilled its initial obligation by submitting the bill on time, the legislation has yet to clear the National Assembly. U.S. President Trump is now citing that delay as evidence that Seoul is dragging its feet and has warned that tariffs on Korean goods, especially automobiles, could jump back up to 25% from the current 15%.
Right, Hae-chan. Now, as you mentioned, both the ruling and the opposition parties believe the bill is necessary, but the process has stalled. Where exactly are lawmakers clashing at the moment?
So the conflict isn't actually over whether South Korea should cooperate economically with the United States. It's over constitutional authority and procedure. The ruling Democratic Party maintains that the original agreement with Washington was a non-binding memorandum of understanding, not a formal treaty. So from that standpoint, the government is not legally required to seek National Assembly ratification of the agreement itself. Instead, the Democratic Party argues that passing the special investment law is sufficient to meet Korea's domestic legal requirements while preserving policy flexibility, and that the bill is moving on schedule.
This is proceeding in line with the Assembly's normal schedule, and the government is well aware that this is how the process works.
The opposition People Power Party takes a sharply different view. It argues that an agreement committing hundreds of billions of dollars, much of it tied to public resources, clearly constitutes a treaty under the Constitution and therefore must be approved by the National Assembly before any implementation law moves forward. From that perspective, the opposition says the government failed to properly engage with lawmakers after the bill was introduced and did not signal any urgency.
Since the bill was introduced, the government has made no requests or demands whatsoever to the Assembly on this matter.
So, Hae-chan, focusing on the National Assembly itself, what are the next procedural steps and how soon could this bill actually move forward?
So the government and the ruling party have actually come to a formal agreement aligned on beginning full legislative review in February, following a party government policy meeting held earlier today on Tuesday. So according to ruling party lawmakers, the administration had originally asked for the bill to be submitted and passed by February, with December and January treated as a customary cooling off period for legislation. So from their standpoint, that means the bill is now entering its intended review window rather than being delayed. And based on that agreement, the Strategic and Finance Committee is now working with both parties to open full committee sessions in the first and third weeks of February, where the special investment bill will officially be taken up. Once those meetings are held, lawmakers intend to move deliberations forward without further delay, citing concerns that prolonged inaction could invite additional pressure from Washington. At the same time, the opposition is signaling it will scrutinize the process closely, meaning procedural disputes could still affect the pace. As a result, while the February review is now on the table, how quickly the bill advances will depend on whether lawmakers can narrow those procedural differences once committee deliberations begin.
I see. Hae-chan, thanks for the coverage tonight. Thanks for coming in again.
Thank you for having me.
Just over 3 weeks since its last provocative act, North Korea launched multiple short-range ballistic missiles toward the East Sea this Tuesday afternoon. Its latest launches come with apparently various purposes in mind. Our Kim Bo-kyung tells us more.
North Korea launched multiple short-range ballistic missiles toward the East Sea on Tuesday. According to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the military detected the launches from an area north of Pyongyang toward the East Sea at around 3:50 p.m. The missiles flew about 350 kilometers, and both the South Korean military and the U.S. are analyzing the specific details. In a text sent to reporters, the military said it is sharing information with the U.S. and Japan, adding that it is closely monitoring the regime's various activities while maintaining a full readiness posture to respond to any further provocations. Japan's defense ministry also confirmed that objects believed to be ballistic missiles have been launched from North Korea at around 4 p.m., and related sources said they have already fallen outside Japan's exclusive economic zone. An expert noted the latest launches come with various purposes behind them.
The move is seen as serving multiple purposes. A final review of the 5-year Defense Development Plan ahead of the 9th Party Congress. A response to the U.S. National Defense Strategy labeling North Korea as an adversary, and an effort to assert its presence amid Undersecretary Colby's recent visit to South Korea.
In response to Pyongyang's missile launches, the National Security Office held a meeting attended by the Defense Minister and the Joint Chiefs of Staff. While assessing the impact on national security and directing necessary measures, the NSO condemned the regime, calling such launches provocative acts that violate UNSC resolutions, and urged North Korea to halt them immediately. North Korea's latest launches marked the first provocative act in 23 days and the second this year. The regime previously fired missiles toward the East Sea on January 4th. At that time, the launches took place on the day President Lee Jae-myung was making a state visit to China at the invitation of Chinese President Xi Jinping. It was reportedly a test launch of hypersonic missiles believed to be the Hwasong-11 Ma, developed by attaching hypersonic payloads to the short-range KN-23 ballistic missile series, often referred to as North Korea's version of Russia's Iskander. With the regime firing missiles to strengthen its internal unity and to show its presence externally, now eyes are on what major policies will be determined during the upcoming Workers' Party Congress. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Now, in the Middle East, tensions are rising as the U.S. deploys major military assets to the region. Iranian officials have responded with strong warnings. Our Park Kwon-woo has the details.
U.S. military assets are being gathered in the Middle East, significantly raising tensions in the region. The deployment as of Monday local time reportedly includes the Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier and 3 warships equipped with Tomahawk missiles. A U.S. official, speaking to the New York Times on the condition of anonymity, said the strike group could carry out attacks within 1 or 2 days if ordered by the Oval Office. The U.S. has also previously sent additional attack aircraft to bolster its strike capability. In response to the growing U.S. military presence, Iran has issued strong warnings.
Iran remains confident in its own strength and remembers the lessons from last June's conflict. We will respond more forcefully than ever before to any act of aggression.
Iran's Navy commander also said the country's armed forces are totally prepared to safeguard national sovereignty. However, the scale of any future retaliation remains unclear. Following such U.S. threats, Iran-backed proxy groups including Hezbollah have also warned they will retaliate if Iran is attacked, raising concerns that any confrontation could spread across the region. As both sides escalate their rhetoric and military postures, concerns are growing of any possible cycle of attack and retaliation in the region. Park Kwon-woo, Arirang News.
President Lee Jae-myung visited the funeral home of former Prime Minister Lee Hae-chan on Tuesday to pay his respects. There, the president posthumously awarded Lee the Mugunghwa Medal, the highest class of the 5-tier Order of Civil Merit. The order recognizes individuals who have made outstanding contributions to national development. Lee's funeral is being held at the Seoul National University Hospital for 5 days through Saturday, after his body arrived at Incheon International Airport this morning. The 73-year-old died of a heart attack on Sunday while on a business trip to Vietnam. He was serving as the senior vice president of the Peaceful Unification Advisory Council, chaired by President Lee. BTS has sold out all 41 concerts scheduled in North America and Europe as part of its World Tour ARIRANG, according to the group's agency Big Hit Music on Tuesday. The North American shows will kick off on April 25th in Tampa, with additional performances added in Tampa, Stanford, and Las Vegas due to overwhelming demand. Amid the tour's global success, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has formally requested additional concert dates in Mexico to South Korean President Lee Jae-myung. Now set to be the largest world tour in K-pop history, a BTS World Tour ARIRANG will begin on April 9th here in Seoul, ahead of 82 performances in 34 cities. As part of our special coverage on how Korea-France relations have evolved over the past 140 years, Arirang TV sat down with the top Korean culture expert and official in Paris. Here's our Oh Soo-young with more.
A new year of discovery is unfolding in France as cultural exchange with Korea hits new dimensions. As Seoul and Paris mark 140 years of diplomatic relations in 2026, Scores of exhibitions, performances, and exchanges will highlight both classic and contemporary culture. For years, director Agnès Benayer has been the driving force of bilateral cultural ties. She was the chief authority in charge of the 130th anniversary celebration. Collaborations have since broadened well beyond film. Benayer says the two nations are kindred creative spirits.
I think Korea is a rare country where art is truly reinvented, creativity revisited, while remaining deeply rooted in tradition and culture. France and Korea share this passion for a millennia-old culture that is very open to the future, not afraid to evolve, and enriched by cross-cultural blending.
Through the common language of heritage and innovation, various art exchanges are flourishing.
In France, I believe what works first and foremost is when events create bridges between the two cultures through dialogue. When we presented the creation by José Montalvo with the National Ballet, it produced something very beautiful, very unprecedented. More recently, Kim Soo-ja's installation at the Bourse de Commerce was magnificent, especially her mirror work in the rotunda. And the French have a great curiosity for craft, for Korean design, Korean culture in general, from hanbok to knot-making traditions. We have come to love and continue to discover many things about Korea. There's curiosity about Korean heritage, civilizations we know little about, whether the kingdom of Shilla or Joseon.
Cooperation continues between leading national museums, and the Pompidou Art Centre's Seoul branch opening this year is highly significant, she says. Benayer was a former director at the prestigious Paris-based institute.
It shows that Korea has become a central place for contemporary art. 10 years ago, that was less the case, but there is an important art market in Korea now. The presence of Pompidou testifies to that.
Today, the director oversees partnerships across 14 Paris museums, handling over 1 million works. The Sanusi Museum alone holds nearly 250 Korean works. It will highlight Korea this year through exhibitions on contemporary art and Joseon literature. More broadly, Benayer is keen to see partnerships blossom across new realms, in particular digital art.
There will be a virtual reality exhibition created by the Musée d'Orsay around the Impressionists. Also, a first online webtoon festival. We're seeing new artist residencies too. The Villa Busan is dedicated to visual arts. In 2026, we will open the Villa Busan, dedicated to graphic arts.
This compares to a decade ago, when Korean culture was mostly unknown across France. Benayer launched nearly 500 events in both countries on the 130th anniversary, drawing almost 7 million visitors.
It was a deeply enriching experience. We hoped then to foster cooperation between institutions for sustainable collaboration. And it's happening. For 10 years now, Korea has continued to captivate the French public from K-dramas such as Squid Game to K-pop, K-food, and K-beauty. More recently, many French people discovered K-literature through Han Gang's Nobel Prize. These dimensions already existed 10 years ago, but only a few recognized it. For us, we could see Hallyu would continue to evolve. That is a great strength of Korean culture.
Under the theme Creativity, Opportunities, Solidarity, over 100 programs across 20 cities will take place in both countries throughout 2026. Oh Soo-young, ARIRANG News, Paris.
Starting this afternoon, a strong wave of cold air moved down from the north and freezing winds steadily picked up. As a result, cold wave warnings have been upgraded for northern parts of Gyeonggi-do, Gangwon-do, northern Chungcheongbuk-do, and northern Gyeongsang-buk-do provinces, while cold wave advisories have spread it across central areas and parts of Gyeongsang-buk-do province. As we head toward the weekend, this cold spell will only get worse. Morning temperatures in Seoul will drop to around -10 degrees Celsius tomorrow and the next day, and could fall as low as -12 degrees on Friday. Other areas will also have a cold morning tomorrow, with Chuncheon at -14 degrees, Daegu at -7 degrees. Highs will rise to only -2 degrees in Seoul, 3 degrees in Gwangju, Daegu, and Gyeongju. Dry weather warnings are in place along the East Coast, with dry advisories in the Seoul metropolitan area and most parts of the East. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is all we have for tonight. I'm Kim Dami. From all of us here at ARIRANG, thanks for watching and good night.